I love to tell the story of unseen things above, of Jesus and His glory, of Jesus and His love. I love to tell the story because I know 'tis true. It satisfies my longings as nothing else can do. I love to tell the story, 'twill be my theme in glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and His love.
This morning we're going to consider commitment. Let's jump right to the questions, and I have several that I would like for you to think about. Some of us believe, and maybe you do or you don't, and you can debate it with us, but some of us believe that commitment is getting harder and harder to find. In our culture, in our society, people don't feel an obligation to anything. Don't feel committed to anything. Why do you think commitment is losing favor in this culture today?
It's not taught.
It's not taught. Why would parents not teach?
I use team sports. When you said you were going to play for a team, it didn't matter if you were going to sit on the bench the other year. You committed to play for that team.
And you were there all the time. Yes.
And now, kids walk in and say, I don't like this, and okay.
Mm-hmm. So why would parents not teach commitment? Even the parents don't feel a commitment to an employer, perhaps, don't feel a commitment to family, don't feel a commitment to church, don't feel a commitment to God.
One thing is, if you are committed to something and stand up for something, you're ostracized.
So we can be slapped down for taking that position. And even for a child on a team, sitting on the bench and not happy with that, might be able to take what he gets from his peers. And the peers may say, why are you doing that? Come on over here, let's do this. We don't have to fool with that. Let's go do something else.
Well, I think we are just a generation of do what you want to do.
Do what you want to do.
That's right. If you don't like something, you don't have to.
Why is that happening?
In my particular case, I deal with 43 young men down on the campus of Southern Mississippi. Their parents allow their babies. Everything they do is, if that's what you want to do, that's. And if the wind changes, and because they have an attitude of, I want to be liked, I don't want anybody not to like me, if the wind changes, they go with it.
So we get the peer pressure, we get the people who put pressure on us in different ways, from getting along to being totally ostracized over something. If you take too strong a commitment, they can really just kind of push you aside. But that why is a big question, and we'll come back to that. For believers, sometimes believers have difficulty making a commitment to God, and sometimes they have difficulty once they've made a commitment in honoring it. Well, why should it be easy for a believer? Forget all the hard stuff for the moment, but why should it be easy for us who believe in God and believe in Christ and what He did for us? Why should it be easy for us to commit to Him? And why should it be easy for us to honor the commitment that we've made? Why would that priority be high in our minds?
In response to the grace we've received.
In response to the grace we received, yeah. If we think about what He has done for us, the commitment that He has made to us, what He has done for us, then it should be relatively easy for us to commit to Him. We should want to commit to Him because of what He's done. And also, if we think of who He is, we're talking about the creator of everything and everyone, all that there is. He created it all. The power and the majesty of this God and what He has done for us. When we think about those things. But how often do we think about those things? How much time does an average believer give to thinking about who God is and what He has done for me?
When we want something.
When we want something. Yes, there we'll focus on Him a good bit because we want to get Him to be the magic genie to produce what it is we want.
When things go bad, you really turn to God.
That's right. That's when we're really looking. But when things are going well, it's because of all that we did, and we're pretty comfortable with that, so we can just keep on going. So it should be relatively easy to make the commitment and to keep the commitment. Because if we make a commitment to Him and we think about what He has done for us and what He continues to do for us, then keeping that commitment should be relatively easy as well. I'm not talking about easy in the sense that it's just smooth sailing. I'm talking about our commitment. We're not going to deviate from it when we're thinking about these things. We're going to stay there and fight this battle, whatever comes along in our way. But why is it so difficult? If in fact it should be relatively easy, why is it so hard? Because sometimes we know that we should be committed to Him here, but, well, let's kind of ignore that and we'll go over here and do something else. And we'll get into that some more later too. And so, and there are other times when we've made the commitment. We've said to God, God, I'm going to do this. I promise you, God, that I'm going to do this for you. And then when things get a little tough, we say, well, obviously you don't want me to do that because you're showing me that it's too hard to get there, so I'll go do something else. So we don't keep the commitment. Why is that? Why is it so difficult for us to honor a commitment that we've made to God?
No one's holding us, He's not holding us accountable.
Okay, so we may think that He's not holding us accountable for that. Why else would we back away from a commitment that we've made to Him? Peer pressure. Peer pressure. So some of those same things that we talked about earlier may affect us here.
Bad habits.
Bad habits.
Sometimes it's described as the weakness of the flesh.
We just plain old weakness of the flesh. That's who we are, isn't it?
Right.
That's who we are. We're really pretty weak, aren't we? We don't like to admit that. We don't like to think about that. But in fact, we are pretty weak. When it comes to dealing with other people and making commitments to other people and honoring our commitments to other people, what makes it so difficult for us to make and honor commitments to other people? What is it about them that makes it difficult for us to make a commitment to somebody else?
For me, you're held accountable, and sometimes you may not want it.
Okay, so we may be held accountable, don't want to be held accountable, and that's really more into my next question. The next question is going to be about what is it about us? What is it about us that makes it difficult for us to make commitments and keep commitments to other people?
I think it's easy to take our relationships with other people for granted.
Right here, I want to focus on the other people. We may take those relationships for granted, particularly with family and friends and people that we know fairly well. We may want to take that for granted. What is it about these other people?
They're different. They do things that we don't like to do.
It doesn't matter who it is or how close that person is to you. It may be your best friend, or somebody, a family member or whatever. But does your best friend agree with you on absolutely everything? Does your best friend do everything exactly the way that you would do it? Does your spouse do? Does your... on thin ice here. Maybe I better not go down that path. They're different, aren't they? And they don't do things the way we do. They don't think the way that we think. And so making that commitment to them is a challenge, isn't it? Because when we commit to do something for somebody, really commit, we're going to do this, that would be in spite of them thinking a little differently, behaving a little differently, and we're not totally comfortable with that, are we? Because if I'm promising to John that I'm going to do this, and then he does something that's kind of contrary, then I'm feeling, well, wait a minute, why should I have done that? Maybe I shouldn't carry that through. But when it comes to me, in fact, I originally phrased this, what is it about me that makes it so difficult for me to make and honor commitments to others? And then I changed it because I was afraid you'd actually tell me what was wrong with me. But the intent of the question is for us to think about it as individuals. Think about it. What is it about me, you, that makes it, and don't answer it as you, but I want to answer it in general about us. All right, what is it about us? Answer it about us. Think about it as me. What about us makes it difficult for us to make commitments and honor commitments to other people?
We'd be held accountable for it.
We don't want to be held accountable for that. That's right. Because it's kind of an iffy situation. And we can't really rely totally 100% on that individual anyway. Maybe 99.99%. So really good people. But, they're just like us, aren't they? Fallible human beings with their own desires, selfish desires. Some of us are more inclined to yield to those selfish desires than others. Some of us are very good about not yielding to that, but some of us are a little weaker. And when we're dealing with that other person, he has those same foibles, and you never know what he's going to do. So it's difficult, yes.
I know sometimes it's hard to make a commitment if you've committed over and over to so many people. It's like, and then you've not done what you said you were going to do. So you learn, okay, instead of saying yes right off the bat, I don't need to make this commitment right now. Sometimes.
And some of it is I don't trust myself to follow through on the
Yeah,
commitment.
trust
Yes,
me,
yes,
not them,
right,
me.
that's right. So we have our own little issues with commitment, don't we, in making and honoring commitments. And so we can expect that when people make commitments to us, that they're going to have trouble in the making and the honoring of those commitments that they've made to us. And we've seen it, haven't we? How many times have you had people who have made a commitment to you and failed to follow through and honor the commitment that they made?
Rehab places are full of people. I'm not going to use any drugs or alcohol.
Yeah, there are some things that are very, very difficult that require a strong commitment. But what we're getting at is limited commitment. I mean, the subtitle for this with Jonah is limited commitment, because the commitments that we make in general are really limited, aren't they? They're limited by the flesh. I mean, how much we can really do. What can we do to be better at it?
So really think about what you're committing to before you commit.
Right, as Betty said, we need to really think about what we're doing, because we've seen situations where we failed, and so it is appropriate to consider seriously before making a commitment. And a lot of times where we get into trouble is when we make that commitment way too quickly. We realize that that probably is the right thing to do, but am I going to follow through with it? And if I'm not going to follow through with it, I better not promise that I'm going to. So making these promises, making these commitments is really pretty serious business, isn't it? And yet we sometimes treat it fairly lightly.
And also get you into trouble too, because some people will just give up committing, period.
Yes, but commitment is important, isn't it?
Right.
And one of the things that we're seeing with, as we were talking at the very beginning, you're talking about the kids in general, and we're seeing it in the younger generation, they're not committing to anything. Maybe their parents have quit committing, and therefore they have no model for commitment. In fact, you'll see a little bit of that in the clip I'm going to show you this morning.
Hey, most kids in this generation, and maybe some of ours also, you commit to whatever you really want to do. You don't commit to what you need to do.
Yes.
Whatever feels good.
Whatever feels good, do it. So you commit to those things that you want to do. But in fact, if your wants change, I mean, if that's the way you do things, then if your wants change, you decide that you don't really want to do that anymore, then you feel that the commitment doesn't need to be kept, so you can blow it away. So total commitment to something, being totally committed to something, is almost foreign to a large part of our society today. You just don't see it. Now, you see it on occasion, and when we do, we really are amazed when we see it. The clip I'm going to show you this morning is from the movie Committed, which was from 2000. It is rated R for the language. This movie is with Heather Graham and Luke Wilson. It's not a bad movie. It really wouldn't have taken very much to have made this a good movie. It really could have been a really good movie. A great message could have been presented greatly in this film if they had worked a little harder at doing that. In this film, you have, as you see here, this is from the beginning. There's a wedding ceremony that's going to take place. This is not about marriage and the commitment in marriage. That's not what this is about. It's commitment in general. But in this marriage, you get a picture of something, and you get this broader view of commitment in this film. So it opens with the marriage of Jolene and Carl. And I'm going to show you some clips from the very beginning and some clips from near the end. And there's the big gap in the middle that I'll describe to you very briefly. In the beginning, you have the wedding that takes place, or as the film opens, and then the title comes in. And then the movie really opens about 2 years after the wedding. So they're about 2 years into this. And you see Jolene's commitment. In fact, at the beginning, you'll see that she has tattooed on her finger a ring because she feels so strongly about the permanence of the commitment, that a commitment is a total commitment to something, total commitment. And one of the ways that she symbolized that was to tattoo the ring on her ring finger. She runs a club in New York, Luke is a photographer, and his paper has him photographing food. His desire is to do the big news, what history in the making kind of stuff, and be out there on the front and taking pictures and having those pictures spread to the world so people could see what's happening. Well, he's taking pictures of food, so he's disappointed with the way things are going. She's running a successful club, and she recognizes that Luke is disappointed with how things are going. She's trying to get him perked up.
Some people are born with a knack for faith, like a big flashlight between their eyes. They're not afraid of permanence. They're right at home with it. And when it comes to bonding with another human soul, they're going to consider that bond sacred. I think I was always one of these people. It just took me a while to realize, because I never knew anyone else who was.
Well, Joe, it's really sweet of you to try and cheer up Carl like this.
He's done it for me 100 times.
Yeah, well, if he's still mopey after the party, I know a lot of really upbeat guys you might just like.
Here we go.
Excuse me. Meg, have you ever heard of for better or for worse? Now, do you think that means for as long as you both shall live, or do you think that means for as long as you're both fun? Because, some words really mean what they mean, and some people really mean what they say. And my word is eternal.
She goes back to the apartment, and Luke has moved out. And he has left a note for her.
Carl?
And then Jolene tries to find Luke. He's just left. He didn't tell her where he went. He just left and said, I don't know when I'll be back. So she tries to find him, finds him in West Texas, El Paso, Texas. She's gone from New York City to El Paso, Texas. El Paso's not quite New York City. Now, she hasn't gone to confront him or to drag him back. She's willing to give him his space. She just wants to make sure he's okay. So when she finds him, she doesn't go up to him. She just kind of hangs back to see what's going on. Well, she finds out that he's actually with another woman. You might expect certain things to happen at this point. They don't happen the way that you might expect. She still hangs back. There's another man who's trying to kill him for fooling around with his girl. And so she steps in front of this man and protects Carl from this man who wants to hurt him. So she's still behind the scenes. Carl doesn't even know she's in El Paso. He thinks she's still in New York. But she's out there protecting him, trying to give him his space so he can find himself, even though he's been with another woman. She's still there, faithful to him in trying to protect him. Eventually, he finds out that she's there. You would think, well, now this big scene is going to happen where they'll come together or go apart, whatever. But he just says, I need more time. Go away. Well, she doesn't react that way. The next scene is she's going to set up camp across from his place, and she's going to be there to protect him and hopefully, get him to come to his senses and come back. I mean, she wants him back. So you're going to see a couple of scenes there, and then you'll see the strength of her commitment.
All right, Joe. I wasn't very articulate. I realize that, and I'm going to work better at expressing myself better about this, but you know that this isn't going to help, right? You got to let me work it out on my own, right, Joe?
How do you know when you've gone too far? There could be some very solid clues, but you could be too busy digging safety cradles in the dirt, and those clues could just pass you right by.
Hey! This is extreme, Joe. It really is, even for you. And I am genuinely concerned. I'm worried about you. All right? I just want you to know that. Because if anything happens, I want you to understand that you left me no choice, all right?
That's how I got committed.
finally, the scene that you're going to see is where the guy who's trying to get him has him tied up and is ready to cut him open, and she clubs him with a baseball bat. The guy who's trying to hurt Carl. She hits with a baseball bat, and then she talks to Carl.
I should not! Carl, I came to talk about our marriage. It's over. I realize that now. I tried. I really tried. But I'm not going to try anymore. I'm going to get over it. Because I may be a committed person, but not to you. Not anymore.
So was Jolene totally committed to Carl?
Up until the breaking point.
For a while she was, wasn't she? I mean, she was willing to do, she thought she was willing to do anything and everything for him. He ran away, he was with another woman, he had her committed, and then she finally realized after a few months of all that she didn't have a future. So for us, total commitment to another person can really be difficult if that other person wants to be really difficult. What about our commitment to God? Well, that's what we're going to talk about with Jonah. I want a little background here. To understand Jonah, you have to understand the Assyrians, because Jonah is going to be asked to go to Nineveh, which is the capital of Syria. So what does that mean, to go to Nineveh? The city of Nineveh is one of the first cities mentioned in the Bible. You know, after the flood, when the sons of Noah go out in their generations, you have the cities that are named in Genesis chapter 10, and Nineveh is one of the first cities named. So these cities of Ashur, Kala, and Nineveh are in that list. I mean, these cities together on the Tigris River, the Tigris and Euphrates through modern-day Iraq, I mean, that's the cradle of civilization. Historians have said that all along, cradle of civilization. So you have these people who have come together into these cities, and you know, this is 2,400 years before Jesus. So it's a long time ago. These cities formed, and then these three in particular start joining together, and a nation is formed. They join together politically for defensive and offensive reasons, to acquire more territory, acquire things, and also to protect themselves from others. Before Abraham, you have a nation formed here called Assyria. So Assyria is an old nation. As we move along in time, I want you to focus on the dark green, because the dark green represents the Assyrian Empire during the time in which the northern and southern kingdoms of Israel were separated. So for those more than 200 years, when the kingdoms were north and south, Israel and Judah, Assyria was the dominant nation in the area and one of the top powers in the world. But one of the powers of the world, that dark green area, all of this Tigris-Euphrates River Valley up here into part of modern-day Turkey, down into Syria, all down through there. But the area of Israel, northern kingdom of Israel, southern kingdom of Judah, you know, that's just below where Assyria is in control. As the Assyrians took that territory, took charge of that territory, you have to understand how they did it. They were a vicious group of warriors. When they defeated you, you knew you were defeated, because they would chop off hands and feet and pluck out eyes and do all these things to the people they defeated, including not only just the warriors, but people in the community who didn't fight. And one of the favorite things they would do is take the heads of the defeated army and make big piles of the heads of the defeated. They took a great deal of joy in seeing the big pile of heads of people that they had defeated. A pretty mean group of people. If you're sitting down here, not too far from where they've come, you're going to be just a little bit uncomfortable, because what if they come just a little bit farther? In fact, they will eventually, because if you look at the light green, that's the expansion of that kingdom of Assyria that takes place shortly after the time of Jonah. Jonah is about 767 BC. 721 is when the northern kingdom falls to Assyria and only Judah is left. See that little yellow spot? That means that they didn't control Judah. They had everything all through here, all the way down, including Egypt, but they didn't have Judah. Well, that's the way it's going to be, and that's what the prophets have been telling the people of Israel and Judah for years. So this is the way it's going to be. The northern kingdom of Israel will, in fact, be defeated by these Assyrians. Just hasn't happened yet in the time of Jonah. In the time of Jonah, Jonah is a prophet. In fact, in 2 Kings chapter 14, verse 25, there's a reference to Jonah in prophesying to Jeroboam II, the king of Israel, that he would have this territory, basically reestablishing Israel, the northern kingdom, in the territory to the north that Solomon had a couple of hundred years before. So God spoke to Jonah and told him, here's what is going to happen relative to Jeroboam. So Jonah is a prophet. He is someone who is speaking for God. God is giving him this message to deliver to the king and to the people of Israel. Sometimes some people look at the book of Jonah as a nice, interesting little story for children, and they focus on the first 2 chapters. But I'm going to show you that the 4th chapter is probably the most interesting one. So we'll talk about Jonah, prophet, man of God, believer in God. He believed in God. He was a prophet for God. God chose him to speak through him to the people. Did he have a commitment to God? This is a man who is committed to God. And if you had asked him before 767 BC, if he was totally committed to God, I suspect he would have said yes. If someone asked you right now, are you totally committed to God? Your answer was almost certainly going to be yes. But we're going to see limited commitment. Let's look at the story. The first part, the first 2 verses, God gave the word to Jonah that he should go to Nineveh. Now stop right there. If you had been living in 767 BC, knowing what we have just said about Nineveh, this brutal nation, and God said to you, I want you to go to that capital city, even just to go there, how eager would you have been to go to Nineveh? Would you have looked for an excuse not to go? Well, if so, we're limiting our commitment to God, aren't we? Because he's saying specifically, I want you to do this, I want you to go there, and we're saying, well, I don't know. Not only does he want him to go there, he wants him to go there and to tell them that the judgment of God is going to come down on them. Now, come on. Let's put it in modern terms. How eager would you be to go to North Korea today? North Korea, and preach the gospel on the street corners, major cities of North Korea. Well, what would you do? There was a song of the 60s, which is way too far back for some of you, like yesterday for some of us, by Peaches and Herb. I would do anything for your love. And if I could sing, I would sing it for you, but I can't. I would do anything for your love. It's a nice, slow ballad kind of song, and it's a beautiful, well-done song. Well, more recently, some group did a song kind of picking up on that idea. I would do anything for your love, but I won't do that. But I won't do that. I will do anything for your love, but I won't do that. Now, it's a sexed up version. It's not the sweet Peaches and Herb version. It's a sexed up version of this. And there's a commercial that ran for a while, and you may have seen it, where the guy, it's a girl and a guy, and they're doing things together, and he's doing all these things for her. He's doing yoga, and he's watching the chick flicks of the crying and all that. He's doing all this stuff with her, and he all the time saying, I would do anything, I would do anything. And then she reaches for his Dr. Pepper, but just not that. All right? So he's willing to do anything, share anything, and he just won't share his Dr. Pepper. We're really like that in many ways, in that we'll do anything, just not that. And that's what Jonah says. Jonah says, God, I am committed to you. I'm totally committed to you, except I won't go to Nineveh. I don't want to go to Nineveh. And he explains why a little bit later, but he doesn't want to go there. Well, we can think of lots of reasons why he wouldn't want to go there. You wouldn't want to go there either. And he doesn't. So he doesn't go there. He goes to port of Joppa, catches a ship to go to Tarshish, somewhere on the Mediterranean coast. He's just getting out of Dodge. I'm going to go away. So he finds something that he really doesn't want to do, and he chooses not to do that. And in order to do that, he tries to do the impossible. He tries to flee from God. Well, as foolish as that sounds, how many times have we done that? How many times have we tried to flee from God, to go in an opposite direction, hoping that we'll just get away from this situation? That'll solve the problem. And it doesn't solve the problem. We'll do anything, just not that. So he gets on a boat. Now we know the last part of the chapter 1 very well. This is where he's on the boat, and God he hurls a storm. He hurls the wind at him, at the ship. And the ship is going through this tremendous storm out there, and we know all the things that the sailors do. And finally they end up, at Jonah's suggestion, throwing him overboard. Jonah is more willing to die than to go back. Because, the sailors saying, what can we do to stop this wind? Jonah says, well, you can throw me overboard. There's another thing that he could have suggested. He said, turn the ship back, take me back home, and I'll go do what God said, and maybe God will cut the wind. But he didn't want to do that either. Jonah still wasn't ready to go to Nineveh. He would rather die. Just not that. In fact, at the end of chapter 1, God sends then the great fish to swallow Jonah. And we all know about the great fish. Chapter 1 is the part of the story that people focus on a lot because, Jonah ran from God, and great fish swallowed him, and God is going to deliver him. But in the end of chapter 1, you have the pursuit of God, where God perseveres, stays after him. He wants Jonah, and he's going after him, sends the storm to get him back. Doesn't work. Has him thrown overboard. Then he has the fish swallow him, and he brings him back. While he's in the belly of the fish, chapter 2, he prays. Think about that for a second. Being swallowed by a huge fish. But a huge fish, great fish, swallows you. The first thing that you might expect is you're dead, right? Wouldn't you? And if he swallowed you whole, this isn't going to last long. But if you're not dead, let's suppose you're swallowed by the fish and you haven't died yet. And so you're still alive in the belly of this fish. What would you do? Would this be one of those times when things are difficult and we might want to talk to God just a little bit about this situation? That might be considered a hard time. That might be worthy of a little time of prayer. Well, Jonah thought so also, and he prayed. And he vowed his obedience to God, and God delivered him. He had that fish vomit Jonah on dry land, up on the shore, brought him home. Chapter 3 is important. Sometimes when we talk about this story, particularly when we tell the children's story, we stop at this particular part, the first part of chapter 3, because the first part of chapter 3, Jonah then gets the word of God back again. God speaks to him again and says, okay, now go to Nineveh and preach what I told you to preach. And Jonah's ready to go. He's vowed his obedience, and he is obedient. So Jonah is now obedient to God, and he's going to do what God has asked him to do. So he goes, and sometimes that's where people just end the story. So, Jonah goes through this experience. God pursued him, brings him back, and Jonah now goes and preaches to Nineveh. Now, does he want to be in Nineveh any more than he did before? Absolutely not. Are his reasons for not wanting to go the same as they were before? They are. And we're going to see that in just a moment. So Jonah goes and he preaches. And then the really miraculous thing happens is the people believe. The people of Nineveh believed him. They believed in God. And it spread throughout the city. And the king heard. The king of this vicious nation heard what was being said, and he believed. And they all repented in sackcloth and ashes, hoping that God might see their repentance and allow them to live. That's the real miracle. That's more of a miracle than the fish, isn't it? If you think about that, here's a city of over 100,000 people, a vicious people, conquering all those around them. And Jonah goes and preaches one message to this city, and there's a great awakening that takes place. Now that is a miracle. They believe. That sounds great. Now you have chapter 4, and here's the heart of the story. Jonah, while obedient, is still not totally committed. See, we can be obedient and not be totally committed. Not only to God, that can be true to others. We can be obedient and do things nicely and all that, and still not be committed to them, totally committed. But Jonah is not totally committed. Why? When he sees what takes place, he's angry. He's mad. And then he says, this is why I didn't want to go. Because I was afraid that God would, in fact, not destroy these people. He hated the Assyrians. Even if God would call some of those Assyrians and make them his people, Jonah hated them all. He didn't want to see anybody. See, that's like us saying this group of people, and I don't care whether it's a nationality, an ethnic group, you name it. This group of people, I hate this group of people. Same thing, isn't it? Same thing. Okay, God, you can save some of them, just don't put them in my church. Okay, God, we can have a few in our church, just don't let them sit on my pew, don't let them come to my Sunday school class. Isn't that the same thing? Jonah is angry with God for bringing people to himself, when his great desire is that everyone should come to him, right? Isn't that what he says he would like? But if he is going to call someone from we have to face it, for all of us, when we're honest with ourselves, there are some people we don't like a whole lot. And there are some groups of people where they're There's a high percentage of those that we don't like a whole lot. Now, we don't want to talk about that, but in fact, we just are not inclined to think kindly towards certain groups of people. But that's a danger. Just as God sent Jonah to Nineveh to speak to the Assyrians, God may send you to that group. And if he sends you to that group with a message from him, will you run? Will you go? Will you do it? Will you be happy that he saves those that he's called? See, that's the issue, isn't it? He was angry. Now, I thought about those words for a good while before I decided to put them on the screen. Jonah, at this point in time, was still a bitter bigot, wasn't he? He was bitter with God for saving Assyrians. Is that bigotry? Is that hatred for a group of people bigotry? I mean, this is hatred. That's bigotry. I mean, that's the definition of the word. To hate this group of people, regardless of the individuals. I mean, it's not an individual thing. He's passing a judgment on this whole people without any... He wants them to go to hell. That's what he wants. He wants that group of people to go to hell. All of them. Every one of them. He's still a bigot. See, this is an interesting way that this story is ending, isn't it? Because Jonah still is not totally committed to God. His commitment to God is still limited. God, I'm with you all the way, except when you're dealing with these people. What we see here is how destructive all this is. And God finishes this with an interesting little story that people don't pay any attention to. This is the one where Jonah has set up camp outside. He wants to overlook the city. He was hoping to see the destruction of Nineveh. And in fact, he didn't see destruction. He saw salvation coming to this city, and he hated it, absolutely hated it. So he's sitting out there, and God has this vine grow up to provide shade over him, so he's a little more comfortable sitting in his little shelter. First night, he sends a worm, sort of like the squash bug, beetle, I don't know what it's called, but he bores a hole in the bottom of the stalk and eats his way up, and this big, luscious vine wilts away into nothing. Well, that's what happened to Jonah's vine overnight. This bug enters into it and just withers away. And then on top of that, God sent a hot east wind to blow on him. And Jonah's bemoaning all this, and he's ready to die again. I'd rather die than see all this and experience all this. And God says, is it wrong for me to have pity upon and show mercy to this city of Nineveh, this whole city of people? And you're worried about a plant? You're bemoaning the fact that a plant has died, and I was bemoaning the fact that these people were apart from me, and now I'm calling them to me. And you think that's bad, and you don't think that this was bad and is now good? That's how the story ends. This whole hatred thing, this whole lack of total commitment to God and His plan is a very destructive thing. It's very destructive. Putting those limitations upon our commitment to God can be extremely dangerous. The summary ties in with John's sermon last week, but it has the great commandment, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That's to love God totally, isn't it? Totally. All your heart, all your mind, all your soul, all your strength, everything that you have. That's how we're to love Him. As Calvin points out, we're still in the flesh, so we're not going to be able to quite pull that off. But that's our objective, isn't it? We should be able to do that better today than we did it yesterday, and we should be able to do it better tomorrow than we do it today. We should be growing in our faith. We should be growing in our love, and we should be better and better at that. Because we're never going to love our fellow man until we can do this. We need to love our neighbor as ourself. The two important points. When you have those limits that you set, God may just test those limits and hope that He does. Why do I say that? Because He says that like a father disciplines a child because he loves the child, I discipline you because I love you. And if He's going to test those limits, He's disciplining you because He loves you. And He loves you too much to let you sit in that stew of garbage that is keeping you from loving Him and committing to Him the way that we should. And the way that we can best improve our commitment is to remember, as we said in the beginning, His commitment to us. Remember what He has done for us. Remember the commitment that God has made to you. And when we remember what He has done for us, when we keep that in the forefront of our minds, then we're much more likely to honor those commitments and work to build a stronger commitment to Him and to other people around us.
I love to tell the story, 'twill be my theme in glory, to tell the old, old story of Jesus and his love.